I don't even have time for my love life, to see my family. I don't even have time for nothing.
When I grow up, I want to file all day.
I want to climb my way up to middle management.
It's a full-time job, and it's extremely time-consuming.
And then just work like hell. I mean, you just have to put in, 80 to 100-hour weeks every week.
This fire station, Pennsylvania's bravest, 40 out of 68 full-time firefighters here have to work at least a second job.
You spent more downtime on not your career this weekend than I did in my entire 20s combined.
They cannot see the outside, living in a very closed, very small world. Only working is existing.
If you work hard, if you sacrifice enough, you can make it and you can be rich. If you put in enough hours, you'll see the result. And if you're not successful, there's something wrong with you. If you don't want to get up at 5 a.m. and have a millionaire's morning routine, you're a failure. If you want to spend time with your kids or learn to play the piano instead of working all day long, you deserve to be poor. Just kidding, don't worry, this isn't that kind of video. But it's what a lot of hustle culture influencers, billionaires and governments want us all to believe. We're gonna talk about why work is so ingrained in our society and why we love this notion that we need to be constantly working all the time and otherwise we're failures and we don't deserve to be alive or happy. It's something we've all probably internalized because it's been shoved in our faces on the internet, in the media, that we constantly need to be working. So we're going to talk a little bit today about why work is so ingrained in our society, like where did this idea come from, and why we look down on people who just straight up don't want to work anymore.
Sometimes you just get tired. I think I just want to do nothing and just read. I literally want to do nothing.
And why it's actually okay to not want to work, to not have this desire to work constantly. Work is literally what keeps capitalism going. Without our work and labor, capitalist money can't grow. Jeff Bezos isn't rich because he's smarter than everyone or works harder than everyone. He's rich because he knew what to do to exploit the work and labor of millions of Amazon workers to make a crap ton of money. We're all working so hard and all of this work is coming at a huge cost. And I'm really curious, is each hour we work one less hour spent being human? What is all this hard work for? Why do we work as hard as we do? Is it human nature to work really hard? And can human beings flourish without hard work? Welcome to my first video. My name's Nergiz. In these videos, I'll be hanging out with you and discussing different topics and eating food related to the different topics that we'll be talking about. If this sounds confusing, just stay tuned. I just love food and I love breaking down like societal ills. So we're gonna have some food together and hopefully we'll learn a little something along the way. And if you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. This is my first one, so they're gonna get better. I promise. This is just like a first stab. And yeah, I hope you like the video. So for our amuse bouche, we'll be having bread and cheese. And this is what the average factory worker used to eat in the early 1900s. Cheers. I would not want to eat this 3 times a day, but why am I still working like a factory worker did in the 1900s? It's so dry. So when I was doing the research for this video, I found out that working on stuff we don't like is literally bad for our brains. If you're mentally unstimulated all day long by the work you do, your brain deteriorates. There's this part of our brain called the ventral striatum. It's this little system in the brain that's always trying to seek out the new. When we seek the new, we can learn and grow and develop and evolve, and the brain rewards us for doing so. But when we're stuck in a routine of sameness, the brain stops rewarding us with dopamine, which makes us not very happy. And this became even scarier when I found out that in a poll taken in 2016, 70% of people said that they aren't interested in what they do all day long, and 18% of people are actually repulsed by what they do for work. We literally feel unfulfilled and numb and disgusted by the activity that takes up most of our time. We're working bare minimum of 40 hours a week. That's what's expected. But because of hustle culture, now we're expected to work 2 jobs, to have a side hustle, to have passive income. And if we don't have all of these things, if we're not doing all of these things constantly, we're branded as lazy and it's our fault if we're like so-called unsuccessful. Wages for the bottom 90% of people have stagnated since 1973, which means that the average hourly wage today has the same purchasing power as it did back then, even though there have been insane improvements in technology and productivity has literally never been higher. So not only are we bored out of our minds and disgusted by the work we're doing, we're working harder than we were before the literal computer existed. We're not reaping the rewards for it, and we're told we're not doing enough. It's giving scam. I did not sign up for this. So we live in a world where technology is everywhere. We've got speakers we can talk to and have conversations with. Facebook has announced the metaverse, in which we'll be able to live in an augmented reality. But we're still working like early 20th century factory workers. So you're telling me I need to work the same way as someone from the Great Depression era, who, if I showed them my phone, they would probably think I was like a god or an alien. And the sheer amount of time that we work doesn't leave time for anything else. It doesn't really leave time for doing the things that we love to do. We work 5 days to only enjoy 2. So until the 20th century, the norm was a 6-day work week. It wasn't until 1908 that a New England mill instituted a 5-day work week to give their Jewish workers a break for the Sabbath. And then after the Great Depression, the 5-day work week was cemented as the new normal, and almost 100 years later, and nothing has changed. So if we've changed the way we eat, why haven't we changed the way we work? For a long time, philosophers and economists predicted that technological advancements would bring down the amount of hours worked. The economist John Maynard Keynes predicted that in 2000, we would only be working 15 hours a week. And actually, in reality, we're working 20% less than we used to on average. We've divided our time very neatly into work and play. Work 5 days a week, play 2 days a week. This is because we see work as toil, as something unpleasant to get through, and then play is the reward, the pleasant thing that we do. When humans lived in hunter-gatherer societies, we would only work 15 to 20 hours a week, with the rest of the time devoted for leisure and play. Hunter-gatherers were insanely skilled. They knew everything. They had so much knowledge about the land, vegetables, fruits, what you could and couldn't eat, but the work they did wasn't super labor-intensive. And then in the agricultural revolution, humans became very, very labor intensive. All of a sudden we had wheat, crops to grow, we had animals to rear. And in order to reap the rewards of your labor, you had to do a lot of labor. You had to milk the cows for hours. You had to go and harvest your crops, otherwise you wouldn't eat. Since then, our technological advancements have been almost mind-boggling, and you would think that logically that would bring down the amount of hours we work, because we don't really need to do anything super labor intensive anymore in the developed world. But our work time hasn't really decreased. And there are some people who theorize that it's because we still think of work as unpleasant, as toil, as something to get through in order to reap the rewards. If other people aren't toiling as hard as we are, then they shouldn't get the rewards. In hunter-gatherer societies, work wasn't seen as toil. Work didn't have a cost and an attached benefit. Life was a playful adventure, and you didn't have to do something unpleasant in order to reap the rewards. But guys, you need to be working hard because our shareholders' pockets need filling. So read this article on how to be productive in a global pandemic, because we really need to be working during this time.
So you just need to be thinking about the company, be creative, and have a positive mindset, and you'll find something to do during this time at home.
A lot of people, myself included, actually feel guilty for not being productive, like our worth is somehow diminished if we're not working enough or making enough money or hustling enough. Productivity culture has given rise to toxic productivity, which is like an unhealthy obsession with getting work done constantly and being productive. I'm sure you've seen those videos on YouTube and TikTok. They're everywhere. Those that girl videos where like it's seemingly every single second of these people's days are planned out. They do everything to maximize their self-care, their productivity, but it's actually toxic because these people can't even keep up with their own staged perfection in real life. It's also toxic because it views rest or leisure or like literally not doing anything or just doing something for the sake of it, not because you want a result. It views that as lazy and a bad thing. Like, think about this. If you just want to like chill with your family or your friends, according to productivity culture, you're not doing enough. Like you're lazy. So something that makes you happy, that you do just for the sake of it, you're not allowed to be doing that. And this kind of culture leads to burnout, which is literally a workplace disease as defined by the World Health Organization. And it can manifest physically in the form of aches and pains, or even mentally as depression and anxiety. The amount we work is literally bad for our health, and it's almost impossible to unplug because of all the technology we have. We get pinged, we have our email apps on our phone. So we're getting sick, stressing ourselves out over work, but why are we still glorifying it? Going back to when we used to work in factories, productivity used to be measured as the output of the entire factory. So how much did one factory produce in one day? But in the 1950s, knowledge work became commonplace. Productivity began to be measured by the individual output of every single person. The problem is, humans are alive. They're not machines. They're not factories. We have emotional needs, off days, sick days, menstrual cramps, hobbies. Increasing productivity means increasing the input to get more output. But if we increase input individually, that means we sacrifice all of those things that we need to spend time on to be happy as humans. We need to sacrifice spending time in nature, spending time with our kids and our loved ones, exercising, sleeping, or just relaxing. Increasing productivity means less time spent being human and more time spent as a resource to make money for the company you work for or the shareholders of that company. For our starter, we'll be having avocado toast with kombucha, the ultimate millennial Gen Z lunch, and the number one reason we can't afford to buy houses. Gotta wash it down with a second reason we can't afford anything. God, I love kombucha. So there was a thread on Twitter that I saw a few weeks ago. Basically, they were talking about the lie flat generation, which describes the phenomenon of like well-educated millennials quitting their jobs to lie flat and basically opt out of the job market because they're like unsatisfied with the way things are going. And the thread, which was definitely written by a boomer, basically said that the labour market was behaving strangely, that there have never been so many job openings and yet unemployment is still really high, and that people have never had so much leisure time, so much rest time, that basically whoever is in this lie flat generation is spoiled and lazy, you know the drill. And what the piece conveniently left out is that productivity has never been so high, and that the average house price has almost doubled since the economic crash of 2008, and economic inequality has reached levels never seen before. So millennials and Gen Z are drowning in debt. They can't save as much as their parents, and they're getting burned out, and you want to know why people are opting out. Like at this point, it's on you if you're confused. Just do a quick Google or just like talk to someone younger. So during the pandemic, I personally quit my job and I was terrified, but I quickly found out that I wasn't alone in my decision.
I am fucking crazy, but I am free.
They're calling this period, like during and after the pandemic, the Great Resignation. Basically, people I think are realizing that this is a very, very crappy deal. The social aspects of work have pretty much disappeared, so we're just on our own in our homes working all day. And I think that what was getting people through before was like going to work and having that camaraderie, that shared feeling of like, oh, I don't want to be here, you know? On top of it, 41% of people are actually thinking of quitting right now. Employers are really struggling to fill open jobs, especially in the hospitality industry, which is notorious for worker exploitation. They're struggling to find people to hire. It's gotten so bad to the point where they're literally going to other restaurants and hotels and whatever and handing out business cards, trying to poach other people who are already employed. And there are some chains in the UK, like Itsu, I think, who have increased their wages 3 times already because they're so scared that people might leave. And I'm just like, what did you expect? Like, maybe people are just tired of being exploited. Those same people who chalk all of this up to laziness have a completely other thing coming, because according to Devon Price, who wrote this book called Laziness Does Not Exist, it's in the name, laziness is not a thing. It's not defined in science. It's not a thing that exists. Basically, calling someone lazy is way too easy, and it ignores the wider context around why they might not be doing what they're supposed to be doing. The book talks about resting and recharging as a basic human need, and that having no motivation to do anything is actually healthy and a completely normal human emotion. And it says that the average worker can only focus around 3 or 4 hours a day on their work or their tasks for the day, and the rest of the time is focused on like checking their phone or like making tea or making food, and that time that they've spent doing those things is actually regenerative and necessary for those 3 to 4 hours of focused work that they might be doing. People who by society's standards have failed, for example homeless people or people who don't do the dishes all day or don't make their beds because maybe they're depressed, we're ignoring the internal or external circumstances that might be causing them to act the way they do, and dismissing these people as lazy is just way too easy and not painting the right picture. My pet peeve is those videos on TikTok and YouTube like Gary Vee.
My friends tell me all the time they're so ambitious, and I'm like, if that's true, then you punt leisure and you punt concerts at Jones Beach and you work.
Who shout at people telling them, don't go out, like live at home, work 3 jobs in your 20s, like don't go to concerts, don't enjoy your life, and you'll be successful if you basically just like give up being human and enjoying things. Like, why does that need to be a thing if you want to be successful? Why does that need to be a thing if you want to just like put food on the table and live a nice life? And it instills this idea in people that you can make it if you work hard enough. But it ignores injustices like racism, sexism, ableism, poverty that are very real obstacles standing in the way of someone being successful. The system we live in right now relies on some people being rich and some people being poor, because if there weren't poor people, there wouldn't be anyone to do all the hard work that is necessary for the rich people to be as rich as they are. These people, these hustle gurus, make money on people's ability to dream and to aspire to something. But we can never actually reach those heights. Definitely not all of us can, because that would undermine the power and the wealth of the people who already have it. They don't want to just give it away. We're under this illusion that we all might one day reach these heights and this success, but for most people, it's just not possible. So for our main course, we'll be having khingal, which is an Azerbaijani pasta dish with meat and garlic yogurt and caramelized onions. It's delicious. It's what I ate growing up. And this food is really part of my identity. And I love the fact that I'm able to choose what I identify as. And I don't like the fact that we live in a world where pretty much everyone's identity is first and foremost tied to their job. Yeah, I'm really excited for this. I'm only gonna have a bite. I'm gonna demolish the rest later. To be honest, I don't know why I made this for the camera, because this is really messy to eat. Oh my god. When you first meet someone, what is the first thing you ask about them? Probably their name, and probably what they do for a living. I hate it. I don't know about you. I do it. It's just been indoctrinated into me, but I really hate it. And it's like, I get it. You want to know more about this person. Knowing their job kind of gives you that context. And like, we literally spend all our time doing it. So yeah, like, it makes sense that we ask this question. But I sometimes wonder, like, if we all didn't work so much, what would we ask instead? I think it's hard for us to imagine a world where work isn't the main thing that everyone does. And from when we're children, we're asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? What identity do you want that's tied to making money? This idea of a job being an identity is ingrained in us from before we can even speak. One of my favorite examples of a job being an identity is in the movie The Devil Wears Prada. I love this movie. I love watching it. I think there's a lot of things to love about this movie, but it glorifies work and making work your identity. If you haven't watched the movie, the main character Andy is an assistant to the editor-in-chief of Runway, which is a fashion magazine that's kind of like Vogue, and she's basically subjected to exploitation. She has to fetch coffees, and she's scared to go to the bathroom for fear of being fired from her job. And this is all in the name of like paying your dues to someday be the person who does all of these things to someone else and continues the exploitative cycle. In the movie, Andy basically like changes who she is. She has the makeover, she loses her friends and her boyfriend in order to succeed at her job. So she makes her job her identity. And there are some other TV shows like Sherlock and Mad Men and even James Bond, to be honest, that glorify workaholism. Attaching your identity to a job can be really dangerous, like mentally, because you are disposable to a company. The company doesn't care how how loyal you are. They care how much monetary value you can bring them whilst you're employed. What happens if you get laid off, or what happens if your job becomes outdated? Do you lose your identity then? And I think some people can really struggle with that, like some manufacturing workers who, you know, their jobs don't really exist anymore. This can be really, really difficult to confront. There are definitely mental health implications of this. This is definitely not to say that you cannot find meaning in your work or love what you do. If you love what you do, that more power to you. But I think it's more of a luxury. It's more something that's in short supply. Doing something you don't like or that you're kind of bored by just so you can receive a paycheck every 2 weeks or every month, that's kind of meaningless and it doesn't really fulfill you. And I think there's an important distinction to make between working and creating. Working is like doing something that you don't really like just so you can like pay your bills and exist and survive. And then creating is doing what you're passionate about, learning new things, developing your talents, becoming better at what you love doing. And I think there's a reason young people today have said that they want to become YouTubers when they grow up, because that job is really about giving you the freedom to get better, to learn, to be creative, not just work for the sake of working. Because time is not infinite, the more we work, the less time we have to pursue other, more creative, maybe more fun things, or just straight up cool things that we can attach to our identities in addition to what we do for work. For dessert, we'll be having a KitKat. Yes, I chose a KitKat for dessert, and I did this for a reason. Most KitKats are made with machines. Humans aren't involved in the process of making KitKats anymore. Let's give it a try. Oh, the nostalgia. Let's do a little ASMR. I can't do it the Kardashian way. That like nibbling thing. No. So I don't know about you, but I believe it should be a basic human right that we should all be able to do what we love and what makes us happy and fulfilled every single day, especially now that robots are doing most of the work necessary. Apparently by 2025, which is 3 years away, 2 million manufacturing jobs will be taken over by automation. And in the US, people of color will be hit the worst by automation because they make up the majority of the workforce in like food, cashiers, like customer service, which are the most threatened by automation. Automation is definitely bad news for people who lose their jobs, but it doesn't have to be, because if society supports them with a universal basic income when their jobs are lost, then it's not such bad news after all. A universal basic income is basically when everyone gets a certain amount of money every month, like let's say $1,000 a month, no strings attached, and they can spend it on absolutely whatever they want. In the UK, 2/3 of people in poverty are actually working. They're just not making enough money to survive because of what we talked about with the wage stagnation. If robots are doing most of the work, that means we can continue to make money and there'll be more than enough money to go around to give out to people whose jobs will be lost to the same robots that are taking their jobs. Robots can do jobs a lot faster than humans can, which means the ceiling for how much money we can make is kind of not there, like it doesn't exist. So I really just don't see why a universal basic income isn't something that we should consider. Giving money directly to people has proven to be a great way to boost the economy. People take care of their like bills and whatever they need to take care of, but whatever extra money they have left over, usually people spend their money improving themselves. Like maybe they'll purchase a course to level up their skills, maybe they'll go back to school because they don't have to spend all their time working, or maybe they'll just do some hobbies to make them happier, because why don't we want more happy people in society? And this brings me to my closing argument. We can live in a utopia where poverty doesn't exist and where we're not burning ourselves out to exhaustion to put food on the table. We don't need to be working as hard as we do. There's more than enough to go around for everyone to live comfortably. In fact, if the top 1% in the US was taxed 10% more, they would still each have $1.4 million on average, so they'd be very, very fine. And we could pay for free public college, massive upgrades in infrastructure, and we could triple the budget for healthcare. Society doesn't need to be cruel, and life does not need to be unfair or difficult, especially not in this age of massive technological development that we live in. The only reason it is cruel and unfair right now and difficult is because the money that we could all be enjoying is being hoarded by a very small amount of people who are selling us a dream that we can all one day join them, knowing full well that we can't. We don't need to be hustling and denying ourselves basic human pleasures anymore, Gary Vee. What we should be doing is dismantling the system that makes us feel guilty for wanting to rest and play and spend time with our loved ones and do things that make us happy, that makes us feel guilty for being human. If you got this far, thank you so much. I don't really know what I'm doing. I really hope you liked this. If you did, please give it a thumbs up so that other people can hear this message. Hopefully we can make the world a little bit better. Hope you learn something, and I'll be putting out new videos like this all the time. And if you have any comments or suggestions, I'd love to hear them down below. And yeah, have a beautiful day.